Yes. Got to get this to work. Are we ready? People are still flooding in. Cameras all ready? Well, good evening, and I'm pleased to join Council Speaker Christine Quinn and members of the Council in announcing that we've reached an agreement on the city's roughly $68.5 billion budget for fiscal year 2013, which begins July 1st. Working together, as I've said again and again was going to happen, we've produced an on-time, balanced budget for our city that does not raise taxes on New Yorkers and that preserves the essential services that we all rely on. As a result of our productive budget negotiations with the Council, we've also strengthened city support for many of the priorities that we share with them. Specifically, as we said in our presentation of the executive budget in May, the number of classroom teachers will increase in the next school year. We've maintained the strength of the NYPD and the FDNY. There will be no fire company closings. This budget affirms the city's commitment, I think, to improving the quality of child care through the new Early Learn initiative. It adds about $100 million in resources to child care and also adds some $50 million in funding to out-of-school time services so young people can engage in productive learning, recreational, and cultural activities in the afternoon hours when classes are over. City support for public libraries and cultural institutions will also remain essentially the same as it is in the current fiscal year, and that means that libraries will be able to remain open on average more than 5 days a week, and it means that our $6 billion cultural sector will have the support it needs to continue to play a major role in creating jobs and driving economic growth in our city. We're able to achieve these goals without asking taxpayers to stretch their own budgets further, and a big reason is that the budget relies on nearly $6 billion in savings generated through the 11 rounds of deficit closing actions taken by city agencies since 2007, including $1 billion in savings enacted since last November. It is also worth noting that we're doing that even though revenues from the financial services sector of our economy has fallen. Now, not so long ago, such losses would have been devastating news for the city budget, and while there's certainly not good news either today, the hard work we've done to diversify our economy has helped offset the effects. It has generated growing tax revenues from TV and film production, tourism, higher education, and our rapidly growing tech center as well. Tech jobs, you should know, have grown by 30% over the past 5 years, and we're making investments now that will keep this sector growing in the years ahead. And all of that is a big reason why we've recovered more than 200% of the jobs lost since the start of the last national recession, while the nation as a whole has recovered only about 40% of the private sector jobs lost. In fact, today's private sector employment in our city is at an all-time high. Before turning things over to Speaker Quinn, I want to make two final points. The first concerns the sale of the new taxi medallions that were authorized by the state. Because of the delays in this process, we're now anticipating about $635 million in proceeds from this sale for fiscal 2013 instead of the roughly $1 billion we'd expected previously. We now expect the remaining revenue from the medallion sales to come in fiscal years 2014 and 2015. Thankfully, the immediate loss in the coming fiscal year is being offset by a number of other factors, including reduced debt service costs, largely because of the continued low interest rates. We're also benefiting from close to $150 million realized from a litigation settlement with ING. This is not the first time, incidentally, that District Attorney Cy Vance and his outstanding teamwork have helped stabilize our city's budget. This brings the total that he's recovered to something like $350 million, and I wanted to thank them for that. Second and finally, let me point out that we still face a budget gap of some $2.5 billion in fiscal year 2014. That is very substantial, and we won't hesitate to take the actions needed to close it and to keep the city's budget balanced. But given the effective and fiscal responsible leadership we know we can rely on from Speaker Chris Quinn, who in this year's budget process has once again, I think, demonstrated a strong commitment to maintaining the city's finances on a sound footing. I am confident that we will meet any challenges that arise, so let me now turn the floor over to her. Chris?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank my colleagues who are with me, and I'll take a second just to recognize Robert Jackson, Jimmy Otto, Darlene Mealy, Eric Delon, Finance Chair Dominic Recchia, Leroy Comrie, Inez Dickens, Lou Fidler, Al Van, Annabelle Palma, Karen Koslowitz, Peter Koo, Tish James, Danny Drum, Jimmy Van Bramer, Diana Reyna, Julissa Ferreras, I should try to breathe in between, Melissa Mark Viverito, Oliver Capel, Mark Weprin, Steve Levin, David Greenfield, James Sanders Jr., Debbie Rose, Margaret Chin, Sarah Gonzalez, Dr. Matthew Eugene, Brad Lander, Reuben Wills, Jamani Williams, anybody hiding in the back? Oh, Vinny Ignazio. Anybody else? All right. Not bad, thank you. But first, having done the introductions, I just want to take a moment to say a few thank yous. First and foremost to our Finance Committee Chair, Dominic M. Recchia Jr., who again has done an outstanding job. I want to thank our budget negotiating team, our leadership team on the City Council, all of my council colleagues, and also Mayor Bloomberg, Mark Page, Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs, Deputy Mayor Howard Wolfson for their work on this. But in particular, I want to thank the mayor for his support in all of the budgets we've done together. And I just think it bears noting part of the way that the budget is being balanced in a fiscally responsible way comes from monies that were put aside in the Healthcare Trust Fund, which we did together from 2006 to 2009, something unique in New York City where we took away monies we had, didn't spend all of them, and put them away for days just like this. So I want to thank you very much for having that type of visionary fiscal leadership in our city. You know, with that said, a budget is a statement of values. It's a statement of priorities. And with this budget, I think all of us in City Hall have made clear that the children of New York City are without a doubt our #1 priority. The importance of providing every child with quality education is something every New Yorker and every elected official in this room can agree on. It's what we achieved last year when we all successfully came together and prevented thousands of teachers from being laid off. It's what we stood up for earlier this year when we all came together and negotiated a deal with the Department of Education to avoid a reduction in teachers through attrition and to keep class sizes from going up. And it's what we've done with this budget agreement, working again with the Department of Education and DC 37 to prevent the layoffs of 400 teachers' aides. And working with Mayor Bloomberg and Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs and dozens of advocates and thousands of families, I think we're all incredibly proud that we found a way to not only preserve childcare in the 5 boroughs, but to make it a more effective part of our educational system. After facing a possible loss of more than 6,500 childcare seats and 30,000 out-of-school time seats, we came together and restored funding to beyond last year's levels, bringing the total number of child care seats to over 50,000 and the total number of out-of-school time seats to over 57,000. But just, and maybe even more important, we've made key changes to the Early Learn NYC proposal. This idea of Early Learn was put in place to make sure that we raise the academic standards of child care, and that we also took child care and aged it down to include more infants and toddlers. By doing this, we're saying that child care can and must be a beginning of a lifetime of learning, one that starts in daycare, continues through pre-kindergarten, soon through mandatory kindergarten, and finally leads every child to being able to graduate from high school and go on to college. That is all of our ultimate goal. And today, we send the message that in New York City, it begins with Early Learn, it begins with academic daycare, and it begins with what we've built here today. Now, we all have heard that when the Early Learn proposal first came out, there were some concerns about it, which makes sense. Any new idea is going to have concerns for people. But all of us, particularly with the work of Dominic M. Recchia Jr., Annabelle Palma, Deputy Mayor Gibbs, and the ACS Commissioner Ron Richter, came together to address those concerns. So, for example, We did things like make sure that providers who had long time been in communities were able to be incorporated into the new Early Learn program in a way that they could continue to keep providing services. So instead of potentially pushing them out of the system, as some had feared, we found a way to lift them up to a higher standard to make them part of academic daycare. We also found a way through our work in this budget process to make sure that economically integrated neighborhoods, places where you might have housing projects right behind expensive co-ops or condos. The original way we were thinking about doing child care was based exclusively on the income per zip code. But through conversations with the mayor's office and advocates and councils, we all came to realize that we have economically integrated neighborhoods in this city, and that's a good thing. And we want to make sure that New Yorkers who need child care get child care. And we were able to rework the proposal in a way to make sure need is based on an individual family's need, not just on a zip code's need. So today's budget agreement is a victory for working families at every income level. As I mentioned, we've also been able to restore funding for out-of-school time, which provides quality educational after-school opportunities for middle class and other families. And all of these victories build on our long-standing commitments to early childhood education, to expanding full-day pre-kindergarten, to making kindergarten mandatory. Our budget isn't just a plan on how to spend taxpayers' dollars. It's a statement about who we are as a city. And this budget says that we're a city where every child will be given the opportunity and the resources to learn. A city that refuses to balance its budget by hiking taxes. A city that believes that core services cannot be sacrificed even in tough economic times. This budget didn't come without difficult choices, but I believe every one of my colleagues, everyone in the Bloomberg administration, and every New Yorker can be proud of what we've accomplished and can be proud of the priority we have put on the needs of building the academic life of children as early as we possibly can. And I now just want to take a moment to call on, for a few words, the chair of our Finance Committee, somebody who I think all of my colleagues have seen, particularly as it relates to the school aides, has done an outstanding, outstanding job, Councilmember Dominic M. Recchia Jr.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker Quinn, and thank you, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, for all that you have done for our city. In this year's budget, we set out to improve the educational opportunities of our city's youngest and most vulnerable. But in the end, city officials got a lesson: where there's a will, there's a way. With little creativity and teamwork, we were able to find the resources necessary to deliver an on-time budget, working with everyone involved in the city and the mayor's office. We faced many challenges. Despite our growth, the economy still hasn't recovered fully, and on top of that, we received less help from the federal government. But like true New Yorkers, we came together and we got the job done. Under the leadership of Speaker Christine Quinn, the City Council protected jobs and ensured vital services. Together, we accomplished at what first seemed impossible. Our greatest success was restoring daycare and after-school slots, providing over thousands of children with quality care. We restored funding to the Children's Growing Place, a daycare center housed in a domestic violence shelter. We received literally hundreds of phone calls about this daycare center, begging us to save it, and we just heard the voices of the taxpayers of the city of New York. Support for this center and others like it throughout the city ensure that our children have a safe place to go, a place that cultivates their talents and is conducive to academic achievement. Beyond that, we were able to prevent the layoffs of hundreds of DC 37 employees. I want to thank Lillian Roberts, president of DC 37, Santos Crispos, president of Local 372, and Chancellor Dennis Walcott for coming together at the table and working together to avoid layoffs in our New York City public schools. Hundreds of school aides, SAPIS workers, parent coordinators will not have to be laid off. I want to sincerely thank Speaker Quinn for her leadership, as well as our wonderful Mayor Michael Bloomberg for working with us to deliver this budget. This was not an easy process. We didn't always agree, but we had the best interests of the city at heart. And because of that, we were able to work collectively and deliver a smart budget that best serves the interests of the city of New York. I want to thank my finance division under the leadership of my director, Preston Niblack, and First Deputy Jeffrey Rodas. My finance division and all, they did a great job. I want to give them credit for the great success that they have achieved. They work day in and day out. I also want to thank the speaker's staff, Chuck Mary, Ramon Martinez, and everyone in her office, as well as OMB's budget director, Mark Page. Where's Mark? Thank you so much. I know at times it gets a little tough. He smiled.
I'll stop it later.
I also want to thank First Deputy Mayor Patty Harris, Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs, Deputy Mayor Cass Holloway, and Deputy Mayor Howard Wolfson. I also want to thank Heda Mahatis, Nanette Smith, Paul Times, and Christine Ryan, and all the commissioners who testified before my wonderful committee. But most of all, I want to thank my colleagues in the City Council for their input, their dedication to this process. They put a lot of hours in, and they did an amazing job fighting for their constituents. And last but not least, I want to thank my fellow New Yorkers, members of the public who came out in full force at our public hearings. They called our offices and flooded our inboxes. They were vocal, they were passionate, and they were heard. This was a team effort, considering the challenges we faced, a struggling economy, and reduced government aid. It was a success for all New Yorkers. Thank you very much.
Dominic, thank you. Chris, thank you. Before opening the floor to questions, let me just quickly summarize today's announcement for our Spanish-speaking New Yorkers. Hemos llegado a un acuerdo para un nuevo presupuesto para la ciudad. El presupuesto va a preservar los servicios importantes, traerá más recursos para cuidado infantil y va a incrementar el número de maestros en nuestras escuelas sin subir impuestos para los neoyorquinos. And with that, we'll be happy to take some questions.